You slide into the back seat, your scrubs still carrying the faint antiseptic scent of the ICU. Your feet throbbing after endless codes and frantic charting. The hospital's fluorescent glow vanishes as the car pulls away, and all you want is to collapse into your own bed. The driver, a calm voice, a 5-star rating, greets you with a tired smile that mirrors your own exhaustion. For a fleeting moment, you feel relief. But then the route deviates. The child locks engage with a soft mechanical thud, and the streetlights give way to a pitch-black industrial road you've never seen before. Your pulse quickens. You check the app, but the GPS shows you're miles off course. You ask a question, but the only reply is a slow, deliberate turn of the head and a grin that doesn't reach the eyes. This is the moment when a routine ride home twists into a fight for survival. Tonight, we share 3 absolutely true rideshare horror stories from nurses who stared into the abyss and lived to warn us. These aren't creepypastas. They are first-hand accounts of real terror on the roads of New York, Sydney, and Edinburgh. Each story peels back the fragile illusion of safety we all cling to when we summon a stranger's car. So dim the lights, check your locks, and ask yourself, how well do you really know the person behind the wheel? Your next ride could be your last. If you've ever felt that cold prickle of danger in a quiet car, these narratives will resonate deep in your bones. These brave healthcare professionals relive their darkest hours so that you might stay vigilant. Now, let's journey into the darkness. Before we plunge into these terrifying accounts, smash that like button, subscribe with notifications on, and drop a comment telling us the scariest thing that ever happened to you in a car. Your engagement helps us unearth more chilling true stories every night. The final beep of the monitor at Mount Sinai still echoed in Jessica Harmon's ears as she stepped out of the sliding glass doors into the heavy, wet heat of a New York July night, her feet swollen inside worn-out clogs after a 14-hour ICU shift that had claimed a patient and broken the spirit of a third. The city that never sleeps hummed distantly, but this pocket of the Upper East Side was eerily quiet at 3:15 in the morning. The sodium vapor streetlights pooling orange on the empty pavement like congealed blood. She fumbled for her phone, thumbed open the Rideshare app, and requested a Cara black Toyota Camry. Driver Marcus, 4.9 stars, 3 minutes away. The exhaustion was a physical weight pressing behind her eyes, and all she could think about was the cool pillow waiting in her studio in Astoria, the oblivion of dreamless sleep. When the sedan glided up to the curb, its engine a near-silent whisper, she barely glanced at the license plate before tugging open the rear passenger door and collapsing onto the cloth seat. The interior smelling sharply of pine air freshener with a chemical undernote that scratched at the back of her throat. "Rough night?" the driver asked, his voice a smooth baritone, and in the rearview mirror she caught the reflection of a clean-shaven man in his 40s with tired, kindly eyes. She managed a murmur about coating a teenager, and he clicked his tongue sympathetically. The car pulled into traffic, and for the first 4 blocks, everything felt textbook. The glow of bodegas sliding past, the lull of late-night talk radio murmuring from the speakers. Then the route changed. Jessica felt the turn before she saw it. Sharp swing off the avenue onto a narrow side street lined with shuttered warehouses and chain-link fences crowned with razor wire. She blinked, sat up straighter, and looked at the app. The pulsing blue dot had abandoned the highlighted route entirely, drifting into a gray industrial zone near the East River. "Hey, I think you missed the turn," she said, trying to keep her voice light, the way nurses speak to agitated patients. The driver didn't answer. Instead, there came a distinct mechanical clunk, the sound of the child's safety locks engaging her. Fingers flew to the door handle, pulling it uselessly. Heavy door lock clicking with echo. A cold wash of adrenaline flooded her veins, waking her up more brutally than any alarm ever could. "Marcus, pull over now." He met her eyes in the rearview mirror, and the kindly expression had dissolved into something hungry, a predator's stillness. The radio static surged, and beneath it she heard a voice not from the station, but a distorted whisper threading through the speakers like a snake through water. Distorted radio static with a low whisper. The phone mounted on the dashboard wasn't displaying the Rideshare app anymore. It showed a live video feed of the back seat, a dark web streaming platform with a string of comments flickering beneath her own terrified face. "Welcome to the show," the driver said, and his grin stretched too wide. Jessica's mind raced through every true crime documentary she'd ever watched, every escape tactic she'd sworn she'd use. The doors were sealed, the windows barely cracked, but her keychain held a small tactical glass breaker she'd bought after a friend's assault. She kept her movements small, unclicking the seatbelt while locking eyes with the camera, playing the role of a frozen victim. As the car slowed for a derelict loading dock, she braced her legs, swung the breaker in a tight arc, and smashed the rear passenger window, the glass exploding outward in a crystalline burst. Cold air and the scent of river rot rushed in. She threw herself through the jagged opening, shredding her scrubs on the frame, and hit the concrete hard, rolling until her shoulder screamed. Behind her, brakes shrieked, but she was already running, plunging into the labyrinth of rusted containers and forgotten machinery. The driver's furious shouts swallowed by the echo of her own ragged breaths. She found a hollow between two dumpsters, dialed 911 with shaking fingers, and whispered her location through chattering teeth. The operator stayed on the line until the red and blue lights painted the warehouse walls. Police later discovered the Camry's trunk held a camera rig, zip ties, and a soiled blanket. The license plate had been stolen, and Marcus was a ghost who'd been abducting late-night riders for a live stream audience of hundreds. Jessica survived with cuts, bruises, and a permanent scar on her trust, but she also gained a resolve that pulsed as fiercely as the sirens that saved her. She still works nights, but she never gets into a car without first checking the child lock, tapping the route in her mind, and keeping her glass breaker wrapped in her fist like a talisman against the dark. The emergency department at Royal Prince Alfred had been a war zone that Friday, a relentless tide of overdoses, car crashes, and a stabbing that painted Olivia Taylor's scrubs in shades of crimson she'd never quite get used to. So by the time her shift ended at 2 a.m, she was running on nothing but stale coffee and the stubborn pride that kept her upright. The summer air outside was thick with the scent of jasmine and diesel. The hospital's circular driveway almost abandoned, except for a lone silver hatchback with a Rideshare decal glowing in the gloom. She confirmed the number plate, noted the driver's photo-umbed middle-aged man with a generic smile, and climbed into the front passenger seat. A habit from years of driving with friends that she instantly regretted the moment the door clicked shut. The interior was oppressively warm, the air conditioning off, and the smell hit her immediately, a sweet, cloying chemical reek like nail polish remover mixed with something sickly floral, so dense it coated her tongue, hissing, gas leak, faint and continuous. "Sorry about the odor, love," the driver said, his face half hidden by a surgical mask and a baseball cap pulled low, just had the upholstery cleaned. Olivia nodded, pressing her sleeve to her nose. But within seconds, a creeping dizziness unfurled behind her eyes, a weight pressing down on her consciousness that felt entirely wrong. She'd handled sedation in the Ed enough times to recognize the signature of an inhalant diethyl ether. Maybe, or a halogenated agent, and the horror of it snapped through the fog like a defibrillator shock. She reached for the window button, but it was locked. Her fingers scrabbled at the door handle, and it wouldn't budge. The driver glanced at her, and in the dim light of the dashboard, she saw his pupils were pinpricks, his smile a thin, wet line. "Just relax," he murmured, accelerating onto Parramatta Road and heading west, away from the city lights, away from safety. Olivia's training screamed at her to stay calm, to preserve oxygen, to think. She slumped forward as if succumbing, letting her bag slide between her feet while her right hand burrowed inside, past the stethoscope and the half-eaten protein bar, until her fingers closed around the cool cylinder of her epinephrine auto-injector. She carried it for a severe bee sting allergy, but tonight it was her only weapon. The driver, convinced she was unconscious, turned down a dark lane near an abandoned petrol station, killed the engine, and leaned over with a rag already soaked in clear liquid, the fumes so strong they made her eyes water. In that moment, she twisted, snapped off the blue safety cap with her thumb, and slammed the injector into the meat of his outstretched forearm. Syringe cap pop and sudden jab, followed by a sharp gasp. The epinephrine hit his bloodstream like lightning. He shrieked, convulsed, and yanked the steering wheel, sending the hatchback careening into a rusted fuel pump with a grinding screech of metal. The impact jolted the passenger door open, and Olivia spilled onto the cracked asphalt, dragging herself away on elbows and knees, even as her vision swam and her lungs burned. She could hear the driver thrashing, gasping, the auto-injector still dangling from his arm, but she didn't stop until she reached the main road. Flagging down a passing taxi whose driver took one look at her ashen face and dialed 000. Ambulance crews found her in tachycardia from the epinephrine exposure and residual ether. But she was alive, utterly and defiantly alive. Police arrested the man, discovering his boot contained a camera, restraints, and a diary documenting weeks of surveillance on female hospital staff. Olivia took a month off, moved in with her sister, and installed a deadbolt on every door. But she also returned to the ED, because if she let the fear win, she told herself, he'd still be driving that car in her nightmares. Now, whenever she smells anything sweet and chemical in a confined space, her thumb automatically seeks the shape of an injector that isn't there. The Royal Infirmary's night shift had been a study in silence and sorrow, kind of stillness that settles over a ward after a soul slips away. And Sophie Clark had been the one to pronounce Mr. Alistair Dunn dead at 11:47 p.m. His massive heart finally surrendering after a third myocardial infarction, despite her team's desperate efforts. She'd held his daughter's hand, murmured the necessary words, and then retreated to the staff room to cry quietly into a cup of cold tea. Because even after 8 years in nursing the loss of a patient who reminded you of your own grandfather, never got easier. When her shift ended at 2:30, she bundled herself into her raincoat and stepped out into a typical Edinburgh drizzle, the cobblestones of Little France slick and glinting under the streetlights. She booked a rideshare on the hospital's preferred platform. A dark blue saloon arrived within minutes. Its driver, a stooped silhouette she couldn't quite see. Ducking inside, she gave her address in Leith, rubbed the fog from her glasses, and then froze. The face in the rearview mirror was Mr. Alistair Dunn, the same heavy brow, the same silvery stubble, the same crooked nose broken decades ago in a rugby match. But Alistair Dunn was lying in the mortuary, his body already tagged and cooled. "Evening, Sophie," the driver said. And his voice was a perfect match for the patient she'd comforted hours earlier, down to the soft Edinburgh burr. Her stomach dropped through the floor of the car. "You look like you've seen a ghost." She couldn't speak. Her throat had locked tight. The car pulled smoothly out of the hospital grounds, and he began reciting details. No stranger should know her cat's name, the cafe where she bought her morning scone, the fact that she'd been on shift the night his brother died. "I'm Alistair's twin, Callum," he explained, his tone eerily conversational, "and I've been watching you for weeks. You were the one who gave up on him. You let him die." Sophie's training ward with pure animal terror. She kept her voice as steady as she'd use with a violent psych patient. "Callum, I'm so sorry for your loss. Let's talk somewhere safe." But he shook his head and turned off the main road, heading toward the shadowed gates of Warriston Cemetery, its headstones rising like crooked teeth in the mist. Flatline heart monitor tone, sustained for 3 seconds. The sound from Sophie's memory of Alistair's final asystole replayed in her skull, and she realized Callum had recreated it exactly, a recording playing through the car's speakers, a sick soundtrack to her penance. Her smartwatch vibrated against her wrist. She'd activated the emergency SOS feature that shared her live location with her boyfriend James, a police constable, and now she prayed it was still pinging. Under the cover of her coat, she tapped the screen twice, sending a pre-written distress alert. Callum parked beside a towering mausoleum, killed the engine, and turned to face her fully for the first time. "My brother would still be here if you'd fought harder," he said. And in the dashboard light, she saw the glint of a scalpel in his hand, the same type she used to cut dressings. Time collapsed into a series of fragments, her voice unnaturally calm, recounting every intervention they'd attempted, every drug pushed, every shock delivered, while her left thumb frantically stroked the watch face, hoping James was already in his car. Callum's grief and fury warred on his face, and for a terrifying minute, she thought the scalpel would meet her throat. Then her phone rang, not a chime, but the full-throated blast of James's assigned ringtone, and Callum flinched. Incoming text notification ping with a sharp echo. She seized the hesitation, yanked the door handle, and found it unlocked. She tumbled out onto the wet grass and ran, zigzagging through the tombstones while screaming for help. Floodlights blazed as 2 patrol cars barreled through the cemetery gates, James in the lead, his voice a roar of command. Callum was apprehended, still clutching the scalpel, muttering about justice. In the aftermath, Sophie learned he'd been stalking her for a month, learning her shifts, her routes, her life. She testified, went to therapy, and eventually returned to the ward. But she never again walked to a car without checking the back seat, never again assumed that the dead stayed buried, and never, ever ignored the cold prickle at the nape of her neck. The watch that saved her now stays on her wrist, even in the shower. A silent guardian that reminds her how close she came to joining Alistair in the earth. And that brings us to the end of this dark journey. If your heart is still racing, you're not alone. These stories remind us that the most ordinary moments can twist into something monstrous. Nurses spend their lives saving others, but sometimes they become the ones fighting for survival. We hope these chilling accounts keep you alert, because a simple ride home should never be a gamble with your life. Thank you for trusting us with your time. Our team works relentlessly to bring you verified, spine-tingling true stories that stick with you long after the screen fades to black. Never ignore that whisper of danger. It's your oldest, most reliable alarm system. If you felt that cold grip of fear, let us know in the comments which story shook you the most. And if you believe these warnings need to be heard, share this video with someone who still thinks every rideshare is perfectly safe. Your support, every like, subscription, and comment fuels our mission to uncover the truth lurking in the shadows. Stay vigilant, trust your instincts, and keep your phone charged. So, before you go, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because next week's tales are already crawling out of the darkness. Until next time, keep the doors locked, keep the lights on, and remember, the scariest monsters often wear a 5-star rating. Thank you for watching till the very end. If you made it this far, you're a true horror fan. Hit that like button, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs a real scare tonight. Drop a comment with the story that chilled you most. I read every single one. Stay safe out there.